Okay, everyone, welcome um, to Medicine Buddha tonight. Welcome to those who are new, joining us for the first time. So good to have you with us. For those who um, are returning, welcome back. If you're new, go ahead if you want, in the chat box. You can just, say hello where you're tuning in from. And Um, and of course, you can, in our tradition, you can go ahead and start posting any prayer requests that, that you may have for this week. Also, any updates on things that we've been praying for, that would be lovely as well. I know some of you are having surgeries coming up, and I know there have been some sick folks, and some of you are back from different retreats and so forth. So I would love to know what's going on. Um, and you can just post those prayer requests right into the chat box whenever you're ready. Um, so I think tonight I wanted to continue with the practice from last week, which was this kind of rain of blessing practice, which comes directly from the main um, medicine Buddha text that we practice um, in the tradition, Kagyu tradition, um, which I always really love. I tend to really get a lot out of practices that are very fluid, using water. Practicing with water is also a really wonderful um, practice as well. I used to live by the water up in Boston, and really just appreciated just being able just to walk, you know, um, through my neighborhood to get to the ocean. But being near water, being near ocean, just being in water is really helpful. Using water and visualization actually begins to trigger this kind of movement and fluidity. This is why we use the breath. The breath is really associated with the element of water. Um, It's about flowing, it's about dissolving, and so forth. Um, so I love like having that visualization, you know, as well. So yeah, go ahead and any prayer requests, go ahead and put those in the chat box. Welcome to those who are just joining, um, particularly those who are joining for the first time. We're gonna get started in just a few minutes. Um, so we have some prayer request updates happening, which is really good. Um, there's such a power in group practice and group prayer as well. It's when we get, even if we're not in the same place, like we're sharing the same intention and we're linking together across this virtual space, and really beginning to like just push and share energy around, which is um, really amazing, actually. Um, So yeah, so just watching some of these come in. Um, if you're new, you want to say hello in the chat box, that would be wonderful as well. Um, and as we're preparing to begin, um, even going back and speaking a little bit about the tradition of medicine, but particularly for those of you who are new, when we talk about tantric practice, when we situate tantric practice within all these traditions and paths of all kinds of practices and lineages. from traditions of magic through traditions of indigenous practices. And, um, when we talk about Tantra and the mix of all of that, we're talking about the training of the mind, right? Particularly Buddhist Tantra. We're talking about the training of the mind, how the mind itself relates to the body. And when we say body, we're talking about all the various manifestations of what we understand to be body, right? Not just the physical body, but mental body and emotional body or the collective body. We often tend to be much more centered in tantric traditions around the physical body and the energy body. So the energy body being the body, um, this felt body of energy that's characterized by channels, so channels um, by, um, I would say, chakras, nadis. So chakras being like these kind of convergence. Um, well, these places in the body where energy converges um, and creates, um, I would say, an epicenter of energy um, that we, through other traditions, and other practices and modalities, can track and can determine the health of both our energy body and physical body through developing sensitivity to how these chakras are performing. But looking at within Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, looking at mind and body and um, how breath, right, is such an important function. It's the breath. Breath is important because life force energy, or we can say chi, maybe life force energy, um, rides the breath, as we would say. It's so breath and life force energy are connected for us. And so this is what gives rise to ancient, really, traditions of breath, um, practice, pranayana practice. Um, and of course, there's, sound is a part of that, sacred syllables, seed syllables, frequencies, how certain syllables or certain frequencies um, have an impact within the phenomenal world. But really, the phenomenal world is vibrating on within different frequencies, and we can learn to um, connect to the frequencies in which certain expressions of the phenomenal world are vibrating. Of course, our bodies are included in the phenomenal world, including the mind is also vibration and energy as well. So we're learning how to manipulate energy and breath and body and visualization to begin to experience different vibrations. And these vibrations, you say we say we have higher vibrations and lower vibrations. So when we get into the higher vibrations, then we start actually experiencing different states of mind. So like if you're coming out of the Theravada insight tradition, then we would have um, so the language would be jhanas, right? These like um, levels of consciousness, which are indeed extremely, extremely, extremely subtle for a lot of folks, and it's not like we're going up. So when we start vibrating on higher frequencies, it's not like we're going anywhere. We're not going up. It's not like we're going up to heaven, right? But it just begins to um, we begin so when we begin to vibrate higher and move through these different levels of consciousness, the jhanas, then we begin to there's no movement. I'm trying to get rid of the language of moving anywhere, but it's more about a different aspect of the phenomenal world begins to be revealed. But that's probably not even. um, what I want to say either. It's um, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say that. It's, yeah, different aspects of the phenomenal world are revealed as we move into higher, as we experience, rather, as we experience different frequencies, right? Um, the higher the frequency we experience or vibrate on, the more, like, quote unquote spiritual experience we have, right? Um, and usually the higher the frequency you're naturally vibrating with, of course, when I say natural, it means so, like, through practice, we've manipulated that frequency, so the higher the frequency, the I really want to say the weirder we are, but um, the higher the frequency means that, like, you're just in tune to different things. You're just experiencing different things. You're having different experiences, right? And that's going to inform how you make choices in the world, how you choose to live, where you choose to be, right? If you have a higher frequency, um, then you feel things. You feel things really intensely, and you can't be in certain relationships or go to certain places and so forth, right? Of course, when we talk about jhanas and these higher frequencies, we're talking about samadhi, which is concentration, like this kind of, like, how we know this one point of concentration thing, that we started getting into, where in that kind of samadhi, um, is the mastery of really shamatha, right? Shamatha shane, which is calm abiding, or this kind of basic level of mindfulness is all the same, where we're able to allow the mind to be, right? And once we allow the mind to be without reacting to everything, then we move into the insight, excuse me, into insight of vipassana, right? Because once we stop reacting to everything, we have the energy and the agency to choose to respond to the nature of the mind itself. Because we're not just running around, you know, distracted, but we can say, oh, this is the mind. As we say in the first level of this, is like, okay, shamatha, mindfulness is like, this is how the mind is. The mind is full of thoughts and emotions and so forth and so on. Our mastery of that level of practice means that we've come to a place where we're not reacting or overreacting to everything that arises in the mind, which is where most of you are. You're still in that first level of trying to master reactivity, right? Reactivity is actually what perpetuates and fuels samsara. Like, it's the reactivity. Reactivity creates reality, right? Um, it fuels the storyline, right? It keeps the thought going, it keeps the narrative burning, right? And then once we lay off and just start allowing and watching, and then we then that will of creating reality begins to slow down, right? And then we also get entered into the practice of experience, and we begin to experience the narrative instead of just feeding the narrative, right? Um, it's like throwing logs into a fire, right? You're building a fire. Our reactivity is throwing logs into the fire, keeping the fire strong. And then we stop throwing logs into the fire begins to die down. But also, what's important is that we begin to also have more space to experience the warmth of the fire. And you begin to say, oh, this fire doesn't need to be so hot. It's warm enough, right? But we don't stop and feel the fire, the warmth of the fire, because we're just busy just building the fire all the time, right? And then after that, then you have Once you stop building a fire, then you have the space and agency to ask, okay, but what is fire, right? Like, what is the nature of fire? What is this, you know, this light, this orange, red energy, whatever it is, however we describe fire, what is that? That's when we start entering into the mastery of the nature of the mind itself. We begin to ask ourselves, oh, what is this? Like, how does this feel, right? Where is this coming from? What is the nature of this, right? And that, of course, curiosity fuels that investigation. Like, what is this? So when we talk about the mind, it's then after Shanae, we say, this is what is the mind, right? What is space? What is emptiness? What is a thought? What is an emotion, right? And because we've mastered that first level of Shanae, right, we can just move closer and closer and closer into this material in the mind, which is the same as developing the capacity to move into the material of what we perceive to be the phenomena of the external world around us. You know, so of course, bringing this back, right? This is the heart. Like this is like the basic foundation of any Buddhist tradition, and especially Buddhist Tantra. This is the heart. This is what we're doing, right? Buddhist Tantra isn't starting with the deities and the energy and the yogas, the rituals and ceremonies. It's actually starting with the mind itself. It's just the training of the mind and how then we begin to start moving into these rituals that are about deepening that experience of the mind. So medicine Buddha is essentially a meditation practice, right? Or all deity practice is essentially training in the mind. There are elements of um, all basic meditation instructions found in deity practice, right? It's more, of course, more evident and very, very traditional Tibetan Buddhist sadhana practice, right? But this is still like what we're doing is still sadhana, right? Because sadhana means practice, right? Particularly it means a practice to get us free. Um, so anything that we're doing to get free, to get liberated, is essentially, in essence, a sadhana, right? Um, but in traditional Tibetan Buddhist sadhanas, right, which is text and chanting and different components, there's a kind of intentionality to how the texts are arranged. It's a system, right, that's created to um, to deepen training of the mind um, as well. Um, so as we know, mind is everything, right? Mind is the nature of mind. Is the key here. Well, what is the mind, right? Um, so as we're doing, our meditation practice, we're also engaging in deity practice, which is still doing the work of unlocking the nature of the mind, right, for us. Which, when I say unlock, I mean it's like we're experiencing the nature of the mind, and really for the most part, all we need is a glimpse or a taste of the nature of the mind. That's and we're all set after that. Um, you just need to experience the mind as it is, only just for a split second or a second, and we'll never forget what that is. This is important because when we are dying, right, and entering into the bardo, the nature of the mind will be revealed to us because as the experience of the body fades away, we enter into pure experience of mind itself, which is a, um, a jolt, Like moving from physicality to pure energy, for many of us will feel very violent, and that that experience, I think, is very much echoed in the teachings around the Bardo. I think that's really fairly and illustrated very clearly. It it doesn't. Again, the text don't doesn't explicitly say, oh, you're gonna experience a lot of pain when you're transitioning from the body into energy because you know you've been so embodied in this period of time, you've been alive in this lifetime, and you're leaving a physicality going into energy. If you haven't trained in that, right, it's just going to feel violent. In the text, you'll just hear, you'll read things about, all these wrathful beings will emerge, and there'll be loud noises and sounds that'll scare the shit out of you. Yeah, absolutely. I really agree with that. But again, you experience that because logically, you're moving from one expression a phenomenon to another, right? This is why it's important for us to pray for those who are passing into the bardo, because there's a shock that a lot of dead people often, not all the time, but often have to navigate, you know, um, transitioning into the bardo. Again, the gratitude that I have for this tradition is that we're able to train to prepare for that right now in practice. So when we start practicing, in just a moment, medicine Buddha, and we start experiencing movement of energy and awakening of things, that's a replication of our experience moving to the bardo. And see this, it's double the fun because it's like not only are we training for death by learning to be in relationship to the movements of energy and also higher expressions of mind and higher energetic vibrations, not only are we doing that training, we're also experiencing, healing, right? We're also working through trauma. We're also working through physical, mental, uh, pain. We're coming into balance, right? Um, and when we have these experiences that feel like really unsettling in these types of energy practices, it's really a lot of it is about us doing or experiencing the labor of what it means to come back into balance, into equilibrium. So many of us are so far outside of equilibrium that when we come back into equilibrium, it just feels really unsettling, you know. Healing is really tough work because many of us have made a home in trauma, and it's a kind of a homemaking that feels at this point really comfortable for some of us. So, um, or it feels familiar, which is what I actually mean, not comfortable, but familiar. And so, in familiarity, we can derive comfort. Um, because in something familiar, we tend to not do a lot of labor. We just kind of let things be. And so when we're coming back into equilibrium, we're actually having to do labor, right? And what feels uncomfortable again is just, you know, coming back, like coming back to ourselves, you know. Um, as I've said over and over and over again, we have a very limited experience of who we are. We're actually non-linear beings who are forcing ourselves to be linear, right? Especially in the relative, with all these systems, patriarchy, capitalism, racism, everything, these are linear systems, right? And what Buddhist Tantra, and all of Buddhism is asking us, well, not explicitly, but this is my languaging, right, of what's happening, is that we're being asked to experience our non-linear self, which means when I say non-linear, that means that, like, it's not about always moving forward, right? It's not about a neatly separated past, present, and future. Nonlinear means that we're existing in all the times at once, right? We're as much in the past as we are in the future, right? Um, that all of it's happening at once, but we have kind of consented, kind of settled into this kind of duality, this reality, samsara, that offers this illusion of just a straight line forward, which is not, you know. Um, Again, but to experience something that's nonlinear can bring up a lot of fear for many of us because we find it very comfortable to be linear, you know. Um, and of course, this linearism is also very much related to permanence, our belief and maintenance of the illusion of permanence. And nothing is permanent, right? But linearism supports the illusion of permanence. Well, the illusion of linearism supports the illusion of permanence, right? That nothing changes, everything's the same, everything's predictable. And that's not the case either, you know. Um, that everything is always changing and shifting, and that everything has potential to do something erratic and out of control, right? This is why systems like, again, capitalism, racism, and so forth are so violent because it is forcing us um, into this rigidity that is not the reality of who and what we are. And so, therefore, we come out with so much trauma, and that trauma creates reality for us. And that trauma is something that we just habitually react to over and over again that creates life after life after life of circling in and out of this reality until we start getting disrupted. And then we start having glimpses. Like I said earlier, we start having glimpses of the nature of our mind, which means that we start getting glimpses into our non linear selves. Um, and then that starts propelling us towards what this ultimate liberation really is. You know, and that ultimate liberation is beyond dualities, beyond the binary, right? That ultimate liberation is the realization of what is um, without elaboration or manipulation. It's just this is it. This is it. And you can just rest there and what is, and that's when we begin to experience this freedom. As I've said also before in the past, the deity practiced in Tantric Buddhism, which is what we're about to do, the deity arises within the space between what we perceive as reality and our nonlinear self. So the deity, so if this is nonlinear self and this is ultimate, or this is reality as we're experiencing it now, being linear, right, and permanent, and this is our nonlinear self or the nature of reality itself, I believe that in the middle, this gap, that the deity practice arises to take us from linearism to nonlinearism, right? So it's like we have to develop the capacity to step into the deity so we can then therefore step into the linear, into the nonlinear experience. And everything's built in. There's so many things that are built in to that process that's really meant to keep us safe. And what does safety mean here? Right? It keeps us from going too far too fast, primarily, you know, because there's also a risk that we go too far And that creates another trauma for us, because we don't know how to process. Because as you move deeper into the nonlinear, like there's a way in which we just have to keep giving up and offering and letting go over and over again and trusting that that's what we're supposed to do. And then meanwhile, we have these supports that are built into the practice that are helping us, holding us as we're continually letting go. If we don't trust enough to let go of things as we're moving deeper into the nonlinear, then we start holding on to everything, and that's going to create really intense suffering for us as we move into it, because you're holding on but yet moving at the same time. So it creates a tension like this. You're holding on to all the old stuff, but you're being ushered into this nonlinear experience, and that tension that arises with holding on is going to create a really kind of intense trauma, you know. Um, so there are all these things built into the practice that if we just trust it, what I trust really is really the basic practice, your trust and faith, right? Because that creates an opening, a link to, the, as we move deeper into the nonlinear, the trust is what keeps us open and keeps us in a place of letting things go over and over again. Um, and then it makes it easier for us to come back as well, right? Because in the relative, we're just getting these experiences. And so when we come back into the body, come back into like this linear living, we bring the wisdom of the nonlinear back consciously. So our linear relative living becomes more and more spacious because we begin to understand that everything that we're perceiving through our senses isn't 100% happening, right? And that's why, for me, this practice is really important right now, as I move through the world. Without this practice, I couldn't negotiate the world because I would believe in the world too much, right? It's not necessarily about a belief in God or deities, but it's really about a trust in the experiences that I have had through the experience of meditation and deity practice, right? Um, so is it medicine Buddha that I'm trusting in the practice, or is it my experience? It's my experience that I'm trusting, you know. Um, it's the data that I have collected through doing the practice that says, oh, okay, like maybe what I'm sensing isn't the complete story, right? Um, and that ultimately this isn't my home. Like this isn't like this world isn't my home. This is not where I'm going to be forever and forever. And I think there's a lot of suffering, you know, when you want to live forever. Like I don't get that. Um, I'm not trying to die, but I'm not trying to be immortal, right? Um, and then we have all of these, I think real technologies that are emerging right now, um, that are making this kind of idea of immortality much more feasible for us. Um, Maybe not the immortality of the physical body, but the immortality, the continuation of maybe our like conceptual mind, right? Within certain technologies and programs and everything. So um, go and watch you an episode of Black Mirror. You'll see what I'm talking about. Um, but people's fear of death drives the development of these technologies. Our fear of death drives our depletion of the climate. as well our overconsumption. Everything's interconnected. Everything's interdependent, interrelated, right? The changing climate, which we're all experiencing, right, is directly related to our fear of death, right, and to the ways in which we feel as if we can just overconsume, we can continue to bypass, get away from the suffering, or to extend our life, and we want to extend our life because we just don't know what's next. We don't know what's happening next, you know. Um, I think we have to have a little bit of a healthy curiosity of of death and what's beyond death, and we can frame that in whatever way is appropriate for us, depending on our traditions and belief systems and so forth. But it has to be meaning beyond death, you know. Um, well, a good first step is to understanding that death doesn't exist. Death is just transition, right? You know, and if we're not living right now, we'll never be able to die. Well, So anyway, I'm gonna stop talking now because I really want to get into practice. All right. So let's begin. We'll go a little past 8 tonight, just to let you know. I'm never actually quite sure when we're supposed to end, but maybe I should actually make that decision one day. But let's begin. If you have some water, go ahead and have a drink of water. And always to get reminders that this is being recorded. There are. This is the 23rd session on this platform, and all 23 sessions, are archived here, so you can come back and listen to all of this as much as you want. I've been doing that too, recently going back and listening to these talks because I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about sometimes, and I forget it. Um, so we'll begin, as usual, allowing your body to come into a position that feels appropriate for you. And please go ahead and just, if there's any last prayer request, go ahead and put that in before I start reading it because it's hard for me to read as people continue to add things. Okay, so go ahead and do that as we set up our practice. And I invite you now just to turn your attention, shift your attention down to the seat, noticing the weight of your body, making contact with the seat, and letting the seat hold you. And for some of you, I encourage you to actually trust the seat to hold you. And what does that mean, to trust the seat to hold you? So let's shift our attention even lower, and I wonder if you can touch into the earth, just noticing the physical earth, the land under us. And it's the energy of our attention that begins to contact the energetic expression of the earth. So it's just energies meeting, the energy of attention with the energy of the physical earth. Allowing the earth to hold you. If you have the capacity to be with the breath, I invite you to turn your attention to the breath, noticing the in breath and the out breath. If you don't have the energy for breath tonight, just keep your attention on the seeds and the earth. Just noticing the in breath and the out breath. Allowing the breath to actually slow down, which means that we just extend both the in breath and the out breath, in and out. And as we inhale, imagine that we're just breathing into anything that feels hard for us right now, be it an emotion, a physical sensation, if you're able to be with the body, breathing into that experience, and as we exhale, releasing that experience. And releasing. What you may notice from this releasing is that this experience comes a little more fuller into view, right? Becomes what seems like stronger to us. But this is the breath functioning to draw our attention closer, and the release in the breath is helping us to let go of the fixation around that experience. So when we let go of fixation, we tend to experience more space around the experience. Just a few more breaths. So when you're ready, shifting your attention to the heart center, we're going to come back to the breath in just a moment. But from the heart center, I invite you to imagine your benefactors beginning to appear in the space around you, right? All the beings who love you, who want you to be safe, right? All the beings who want you to have what you need. Beginning to imagine that these beings begin to circle around you. This includes people or mentors, guides, teachers, deities, spirits, angels. And just, if you don't see them in your mind, just imagining basically that they're here, you know, slowly we begin to imagine that they begin to radiate the energy of care into the circle around us. That energy of care can be light radiating into the space around us, or it can feel like warmth, or it can feel like anything that feels more appropriate for us right now in our practice. We're just allowing the energy of deep care for ourselves to slowly fill the space around us. And returning back to the heart center now, imagining that you're inhaling this energy of care into the body through the heart center. So you're inhaling deeply into the heart center, really drawing on this energy of care. And as you exhale, you're exhaling internally. That means that you're imagining that as you exhale, that the air breath isn't leaving the body, but it's just being released right into the body. So which is all this means is that this energy of care is not being released. It's just we're beginning to really concentrate it, right? And get it really deep into the body. So breathing deeply into the heart center, exhaling into the body, and just filling the body with this energy of care. And if you're not able to be with the breath, just imagine that you're slowly absorbing the energy of care into your skin, into your bones and muscles and cells and everything. Just a few more moments of really filling the body up with this energy of care. A few more breaths. And now slowly we begin to imagine that above our heads, an expression or an image of Medicine Buddha begins to emerge. So again, it can be this expression of the traditional representation or iconography of Medicine Buddha, of this blue Buddha in golden robes sitting on a lotus seat, radiating above our heads. Or we can imagine our own representation of the healer above our heads, be it a teacher or a guru or you know another deity. We also begin to imagine in the same way that in our heart sensors, the same image or expression of Medicine Buddha begins to appear. Just right in our heart centers. So now we begin to imagine that the Medicine Buddha above our heads begins to radiate this intense but soft white light. This light begins to dissolve, or rather, the Buddha begins to dissolve into this white light. And this light begins to form these radiant light clouds above our heads. It's almost as if these clouds look like clouds during a storm and lightning is flashing. So they're like bright and radiant white clouds. And slowly, these clouds begin to release these droplets of white light, which is just like rain, but they're just droplets of energy, these white, radiant droplets of energy. And all these droplets begin to form, will begin to fall down in us and around us. Our bodies begin to absorb these droplets of energy, which are healing droplets of energy for us. We begin to experience perhaps the energy of some of the things that we're struggling with the most right now begins to dissolve. So these things begin to be washed away. And our bodies begin to be filled again with another energy, but this time this energy of healing. And for the first part of our mantra, we will chant the mantra and just allow this rain of healing to continue to fall in and around us. We begin with our mantra, Teata, Baconze, Maha Baconze, Ratsa Sumungate, So. O Teata, Baconze, Baconze, Ma Baconze, Ratsa Sumungate, So. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, lanzo sumungate soa. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, lanzo sumungate soa. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raso sumo gate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, desua. Teata umbegenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumunga 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 desua. And so, in our next part of our practice, we'll transition into our prayer requests. And as we transition into our prayer requests, I invite you to imagine that this rain of blessing, this rain of healing that's been falling above us begins to instead fall over and into the situations and the lives of those we're offering prayers for. And as we begin, I make send special attention in evoking all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Dharma protectors, all benevolent spirits, benevolent guides, ancestors as well, to all the protectors of the lands and the elements, that we ask your attention and your help in fulfilling our needs and wants and our aspirations for healing for all beings, and including those beings we begin to now offer prayers for. We begin to offer prayers um, for my uncle, Grayland Howard, as he continues to transition into the bardo. Also for my mother, as she turns, she has a significant birthday in a couple of years, and I pray for her long life and continued health. We continue to pray for all the people in the collapsed building in Miami, for those already dead and passing into the bardo, for those who are missing, the rescue workers, the families, friends of everyone involved. Continue to offer prayers for recovering from my wellness and vitality, prayers for me to keep hope in the next months as I await some important medical appointments, and through my interactions with the medical system, prayers for my healing, prayers for holistic healing practices and for research into helping people with autoimmune diseases. We're offering prayers for myself as I can learn faith and trust, so I can learn faith and trust. We're offering prayers for my son, offering prayers for Shikari and all the rules that are meant to be broken and expanded, prayers for all of us becoming something new, prayers for the trees on fire and the broken hearts, and for all delusions fueling destruction to be healed and remedied, offering prayers for my brother Victor and for him to find hope, offering prayers for myself, ongoing shoulder and knee pain from fascia around these joints, prayers for tolerating the anxiety of trying to disidentify with doing and knowing, and to settle into simply being, releasing old trauma around these old identities. Prayers for me as I navigate lots of change and trauma responses at this time. Prayers for Ted Purcell, who entered the bardo almost 2 weeks ago. For my daughter's dog, Emmy, who also entered the bardo about 10 days ago. We're offering prayers for wildlife biologists to identify what is killing songbirds here in the Midwest and in the South, to find a solution and a cure. offering prayers for continued discipline in my practice, offering prayers, continued prayers for my son, offering prayers for areas experiencing various virus outbreaks, prayers for my continued healing and relationships with family, prayers for Mayman, our kitten who passed away last week, offering prayers for my mother's health, both physical and mental. May I cultivate patience with myself, my mother, and all. May I learn to trust myself by turning into my body wisdom, my prana, life force energy through awareness of my breath and a deepening in my practice. May I find discipline and become a vessel of light in the world. Offering ongoing prayers for my dear friend Barbara with reoccurrence of brain cancer. Offering prayers for Doreen, who is scheduled for knee replacement this month and who is not feeling well today. Offering prayers for myself as I continue to heal and progress from foot surgery. Prayers for my cousin's husband as he gets the support he needs as he navigates his health and needs, and prayers for my cousin and their children as they support him. May they have what they need at this time. Prayers for me as I deepen my care for my body. Prayers for our Sangha and our teachers, Lama Rod and Lama Justin. May we always be protected. May they always be protected. Prayers that the MRSA staph infection found in my leg is healed and released, and that the lesion and that the lesson and message in this disease reveals itself. Prayers for Jim Matulski, who is facing surgery for skin cancer. We're still asking for prayers for that my son and his new wife can find freedom from addiction to alcohol. We're offering prayers for my Uncle Garland, who is preparing to transition into the Bardo, and my Aunt Janice, his wife, partner, and caregiver, who needs to be held in her imminent grief. Big prayers are needed for Khalid Hassana, who has been given little time to live from metastatic cancer, and his wife Alexa and Alexa's mother Patricia Bradshaw. Prayers that Patricia can get to the Middle East to see him on August 8th, and that he will still be with us. Offering prayers for Bobby, who is healing from a fractured leg, for Dove and Sue Ann, who are being treated for cancer, and for Jeff, who is having eye surgery. So offering prayers for my friend Linda, who had a severe stroke in March and whose husband died unexpectedly 10 days later. She is doing remarkably well. I want to continue to offer prayers for our world, particularly our climate, our land. Continue to pray for balance, for healing, that we begin to understand the interconnectedness, the interrelatedness of all social issues in relationship to our climate, that we begin to link all of our activism to sustaining our physical world right now. And again, a prayer for all beings passing into the Bardo. May they have no obstacles in their transition. We continue to pray for all beings who are experiencing just overwhelming grief and fatigue right now. As we continue to move through this pandemic, we continue to pray for all beings still being impacted by COVID-19 and all the lives that have been lost to the pandemic. And we pray that all beings have access to the resources that they need in order to be well, that we one day begin to somehow live beyond and through systems of violence that keep us separated and keep us suffering within the relative world. May we all be free, and may all prayers that are still remaining unarticulated, even may those prayers be heard and answered. So as we continue into just this second part of our mantra, just imagining that this rain of energy, light, and blessings begins to rain into all the situations and into all the lives and bodies of those we've offered prayers for. And we begin and we continue. 고제야 참 베근제 베근제 마 베근제 라자 수문가 제수아 제야 참 베근제 베근제 마 베근제 라자 수문가 제수아 제아자움비근세 비근세 마비근세 라사수문가 대소아 제아자움비근세 비근세 마비근세 라사수문가 대소아 제아자움비근세 비근세 마비근세 라사수문가 대소아 begenze, begenze, ma begenze, laza sumungaze soa. 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 begenze, begenze, maha begenze, laza sumungaze soa. begenze, begenze, ma 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 begenze, laza sumungaze soa. begenze, Yata umbegenze, begenze, mahabegenze, laza sumangane zoa. 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 So we begin to imagine that this rain of blessing slowly begins to ease up and stop, that these clouds of blessings begins to dissolve into white light above our heads, and that all our benefactors around us are all the beings who love and care for us, that we thank them for their love and care. We begin to imagine that they too begin to dissolve into white light, and that we absorb that white light into our own heart centers. And we slowly begin to come back into the space. We begin to turn our attention to our closing prayer, which you'll find right in the chat box here. We'll be We'll recite this 3 times together. May I be a protector to those without protection, and a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space, the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, and a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space, and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And finally, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. All right. Thank you all so much for your practice today. And please continue to practice through the week, as we know there are many things to practice for. So thank you all so much. And I will see you again at some point. All right. Thank you all.